Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another 20th Century Geek review. Okay, so we're going to be tapping into the 80s theme. I've recently just done Point Break, and I want to tap into another 80s star, another 80s name that has actually taken a bit of a resurgence recently, thanks to the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, saw Ant-Man the Wasp earlier this year, and obviously Michael Douglas in it. It's actually a really good film. I quite highly recommend that. But Michael Douglas taking a bit of a resurgence. As an older man, seems to be quite enjoying what he's doing. I've always thought of him as a quality actor, but I've never kind of took him as a leading man, if you will. But if you go back to his 80s career, then the guy's got some cracking films under his belt. You know, you got Basic Instinct. You know, my video copy of that, the VH copy of that, was worn to a bare playing capacity in certain parts. I'll let you guess which parts. But things like Romance and the Stone, Jewel of the Nile, those two films are also great. I love those. But you got The Game, Falling Down. The guy did some cracking films. He really was a bit of a heavy hitter in that range, and he was, as you can see, sort of, you know, different kinds of films, real different genres. But there's a film that I don't think gets talked about enough in his back catalogue, in his filmography, that I think really needs to be talked about again. I haven't watched it in a long time, and I recently picked it up, and I'm digging the Paramount's new release packaging, these 80s collection. But I want to talk about Michael Douglas in Black Rain. So this is Michael Douglas, Andy Garcia. It's the American obsession with the Japanese of this period, because in this film, this era, you also get Rising Sun, Sean Connery and Wesley Snipes, and there's a couple of others. RoboCop 3 is another prime example. It was the fear of the growth of the Japanese economy in the sort of the early 90s, late 80s. So I'm going to go away and I'm going to watch this. I haven't watched this for probably 15-20 years, and I'll report back and see if it stands up to my memories and what I think Black Rain really should be. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're back! So, I've just been watching Black Rain, and so I'm going to give my thoughts on it. Now, as I said, I haven't watched this in a long time. It's been 15, probably 20 years since I've seen this. And it stands up. Excuse me. It really does stand up. Directed by Ridley Scott. So, Ridley Scott, you know, we sometimes forget that it's the guy that did, you know, obviously did Alien, he did Blade Runner, we think of Gladiator, and other films. More recently, obviously, then he's completely ruined and destroyed, in my opinion, the Alien franchise with Prometheus and Covenant. But he seems to sort of garnered this reputation for sort of classier, sort of stylistic kind of films. And that's mostly true, but the fact of the matter is you can't forget that Ridley Scott came from making adverts, like commercials. That was his bread and butter for the longest possible time. So he started out, and there are films that he's done way back when, you know, that really weren't high art, but he's always had a really good visual eye. And so him and his brother Tony Scott was obviously the action guy, and you get, you know, some great films from that guy. So Ridley Scott did some other kind of films. He always had a slightly different visual, I think is the best way to put it, but no less good. Just a different quality. I think, you know, when you think of Ridley Scott, people think Oscar winner or should be Oscar nominated, and all. They think of an auteur kind of director. And that's why I think some of his other films, some of like his I'm not going to say trashy, but maybe pulpier films, get forgotten. And I think that's a real shame, and that's not the sort of the case with Black Rain. I think this film is a really cracking 80s cop thriller. Cops were the superheroes of the 80s and the 90s. You know, if anyone ever says to you, oh, you can't, you know, superhero films are going to die a death, well, they probably will do eventually, but, or you can only do one kind of superhero film, blah, blah. just tell them to look at the cop films of the 80s and 90s. Everything from, obviously, Black Rain, you get the thrillers, Black Rain, to the comedies, 48 Hours, Beverly Hills Cop, Red Heat, through to just the plain old action ones, Die Hard, Police Academy. Oh, the cops were just in everything. I can't think off the top of my head now, but there was so many great. Lethal Weapon. There was, the Lethal Weapon series. All these great cop films, cops, buddy cops mainly, were the thing for the 80s and 90s, and they came in different sorts. You get your Cobras, your one-man army kind of broken, virtual sociopaths. You're almost like, your Clint Eastwood sort of Dirty Harry types, through to the Eddie Murphy, sort of comedy, one-liners, that sort of thing. But there's something that runs through them all. Like, if you're going to get, you either get a paired-up duo, and you follow the duo, circa sort of Running Scared, Billy Crystal, and I forget the other guy's name, or you get the lone cop that goes into a situation. Even in a buddy cop situation, in every buddy cop situation, there was sort of like the one and the cop and the, right? Same thing from Red Heat. You get James Belushi, the American cop, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's his Russian counterpart. The Rookie, James Belushi and James Woods and Michael J. Fox. James Woods as the hardened detective, Michael J. Fox as the actor. I think that's it, or the Rookie. It goes round, okay? That might have actually been the hard way, now I think about it. The Rookie was Clint Eastwood and Charlie Sheen. Anyway, the point being, there were so many variances on this. And this film is no different. This film is a litany of 80 cop cliches. Okay? And you have Michael Douglas, a great performance from Michael Douglas, as sort of like the hard done by, possibly dirty cop. He's divorced, he's paying alimony, he's got kids he doesn't see enough, he likes to ride his bike too fast without a helmet, that's how you know he's a bad one. He wears a leather jacket and he rides his bike too fast. That's movie shorthand for you. And then you get Andy Garcia, who's the sort of the clean cut, not really, I don't know if he's their partners, but they end up in a situation where they're friends and they have to travel to Japan to transport a Yakuza assassin back. But they're the opposites. They're pretty much polar opposites. They're friends, but they're polar opposites. So you've got the Michael Douglas hard-bitten, worn down, gumshoe almost, that Sam Slade kind of worn thing. And then you get the clean cut, Andy Garcia, expensive suits, expensive shoes, looking nice, blah blah. Guess which one's going to survive? And that was almost like an 80s cliche in itself. Does it affect the film? No, not at all, actually, because this is done through a different. This has got a Ridley Scott twist. The visuals in this are fantastic. The cinematographer for this also did films like Die Hard, a couple of others, and it looked great. If anything, I would say the one thing I'm really disappointed with, like heavily disappointed with, is I picked this up relatively cheap. These Paramount 80s classics or 80s collection that Paramount appears to be doing, and I'm going to be honest with you, it's a little crap as a package. This looks very nice, wonderful, but the film itself is in a 16:9 ratio and it's just shrunk on the screen. It doesn't look good at all. You have to zoom in, or I at least had to, maybe there was something wrong with TV, but I had to zoom in to get it to fit the screen properly, and in doing so you get a lot of graininess. It was, if anything, one thing I would say, it was like watching it back in 1990s, 91 when it came out. It was like watching it on ITV or BBC on a Saturday night, which is how I remember it. So there was a nostalgia view, there was a definite nostalgia of watching it in a crappy sort of quality. Having said that, this film deserves a 2K or 4K restoration, 30th anniversary edition for next year. 89 it came out, so this film deserves that. It looks brilliant, the direction is fantastic, the cinematography looks good. So Osaka, where the film is set in Japan, is a great character. There are some scenes in this that are beautiful, absolutely stunning. and they've chosen some amazing locations. And I just think a Blu-ray transfer of this would be amazing. It would look cracking. Anyway, so they travel to Japan. You then get the characters, and then you get the sort of the. Not only have you then got the clashing types of policing that you have at home, you then introduce the fish out of water, sort of like the bad cop now in a completely different environment. So a la Beverly Hills Cop, New York cops into Japan. So then you had the other elements of the Japanese police, very procedural, very sort of by the book, or as they're portrayed in this, portrayed very stuffy in this. And obviously they have to fight against that to get to the bad guys, all this other stuff. It's hugely cliched, hugely predictable. Would it have been at the time? Possibly. But it has been copied a whole bunch of times since. Like literally, this film has been made over and over again. But again, I said that doesn't affect it. It's a great film. It really is. It feels grimy. It feels sort of like noirish. I dug it. I've just got to say, I really enjoyed watching this film. Going back to this film, it was so good. And I forgot how good Michael Douglas was. Like, he really is a great actor. The chemistry he has with Andy Garcia and the lead Japanese actor, whose name I forget. Sorry. Brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. The story is cliche, but it's enjoyable. The direction's fantastic. I'm repeating myself, so I'm going to wrap this up pretty quick. But it's a good film. This is a great film. Black Rain's a really underrated Ridley Scott film. Is there anything to take from this, really? No. It's just a bit of a corker. I think this should totally be remembered. They should be raised up as a sort of Well, I think I want to cover more. It's maybe thinking more about cop films. I want to go back and have a look at some actually. This is a bit of a doozy, really. It's opened up some doors. The downsides of it, Kate Capshaw's in it. I just find it irritating. Everything she's been in, the woman just irritates me. I don't know why. Possibly because of her character in Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom, is just hangs over her as terrible. But aside from that, I don't want to give much away about the story because there's some bits that are twists, but you could watch this along with so many of the films, and it stands up. I mean, people still talk about Lethal Weapon, and I know they got sequels, or like Last Boy Scouts, or this just stands up as a good gritty cop movie. Dark Blue from early 2000 with Kurt Russell. It's in that vein. I just feel like there's a level of that in it as well. There's some really good performances in this, solid performances, and I just love that era. You really get a sense of, from this as well in particular, you really get a sense of America's fear of Japan at this point, which I find fascinating. That's what comes through hugely in the story, in the movie, and the way things are shot, is that during the 80s, Japan really, the economy boomed. Their post-war economy, post-World War II economy really built up. Been building for years, for like 40 years. And the 80s was when the boom came in the electronics industry and in the tourist industry and all this other stuff. And the Americans were fascinated by this. They thought they just had some sort of, some weird, like magic formula. Like they came out of nowhere. And they wanted a part of it. But they didn't understand it. They just didn't get it, and they were terrified that they were going to be overtaken economically by the Japanese. And it shows in this film, this real sort of like wariness of the Japanese culture and Japanese ways, and it's really bizarre, to have that and to see sort of Michael Douglas's POV as just to look through that at this weird sort of slice of Japanese culture. And it is a very small slice. Like, this doesn't give a view of Japanese ways of life, or Japanese heritage, or tradition, or even their modern way of doing things. But it's still a fascinating thing. And the other thing as well, this taps into, was another huge thing in sort of 80s and early 90s Americana, was this idea of sort of like mixing cultures together. Like, you had everything. The fish out of water thing was just a big thing in the 80s for Americans. everything from Crocodile Dundee, Red Heat, as I mentioned, this, Black Rain, and they just love to take one thing and plonk it into another, or just clash two together. They just thought it was hilarious for some reason, or it would provide real drama. I'm glad it sort of died down. I don't think it works. You get remnants of it still. Rush Hour. So basically anything Jackie Chan has been in the American market. But that's a sidestep. So that's just the thing of it. But should this be revisited? Yes, it definitely should. It should get a Blu-ray. That's all I can say really. So anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up. Black Rain. I really enjoyed this. I'm gonna give it a solid 8 out of 10. It's a really good 80s cop thriller. And it's a good stepping stone image into where Ridley Scott was at in that period. I wish he would make something like it again. George Miller going back and making Mad Max Fury Road, right? Man, guy in his 80s going back and making Fury Road, tapping back into that Mad Max craziness and producing one of the biggest balls out films of the last couple of years. And you watch this and you think, it's him, Ridley Scott, he can do it. He's made some great films. Where the fuck has that gone? Like, I really want Ridley Scott to tap into that grittiness and that visuals that he used to have, and force it into something like this to do it again one last time. We'll see. Anyway, that's where I'm at. I think this gets an 8 out of 10. I highly recommend this film. Go find it, seek it out. It doesn't actually have a Blu-ray release in the UK at the moment, but it's on DVD. I picked this up for £5 at Tesco's. Just be aware that the aspect ratio is a bit shit. Okay, right, on to the next review at some point. Thanks very much.